The fabric truly does date back to the time of Christ, or at least, that is what new evidence seems to suggest. But now, in the age of artificial intelligence, even the digital world has begun to lean on one of the most mysterious relics in human history. Inside a supercomputer, deep within a server room humming with electricity, lines of code flash across the screen as an AI system studies millions of microscopic data points taken from a single, ancient object, the Shroud of Turin. It isn't scanning for a face or a pattern of stains. It's searching for something far deeper, order hidden inside the chaos of old linen fibers. Then, suddenly, the system halts. The algorithms detect something extraordinary, a signal, a mathematical rhythm buried beneath the visible image. A repeating geometric symmetry woven invisibly through the fabric. A pattern that, according to every scientific model, should not exist. No medieval craftsman could have produced it, and no non-natural process explains it. Scientists are now left with a stunning mystery. What exactly is the machine uncovered? The story is now being called the Code in the Cloth. The Shroud of Turin, roughly 14 feet long, bears a faint, ghost-like imprint of a man who appears to have endured unimaginable suffering. For the faithful, it's the most sacred relic on earth. For skeptics, it's an ingenious medieval hoax. It's ironic, isn't it? Humanity has sent people to the moon. We've mapped our DNA. We've unlocked the atom. Yet we still can't come to a definitive conclusion about a single piece of fabric. Back in 1988, it seemed like the mystery had been laid to rest once and for all. 3 prestigious laboratories, in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona, performed radiocarbon dating on a tiny corner of the shroud. The results all matched. The linen dated from somewhere between 1260 and 1390 AD. Case closed. The shroud, it seemed, was a product of the Middle Ages, not the 1st century. But the story didn't end there. In fact, that is where it began to unravel. Because the more scientists examined the shroud, the more impossible details they found. It all started with a lawyer and amateur photographer named Secondo Pia, who in 1898 took the first ever photograph of the relic. What he saw when he developed the image changed everything. In his darkroom, the negative of the photo revealed a highly detailed positive image of the man's face, the opposite of what one would expect. The image on the shroud, it turned out, was itself a photographic negative, centuries before the invention of photography. That alone should have been impossible. How could a medieval artist, in an age without cameras, chemistry, or electricity, have created something that behaves like a modern photograph? And the mystery only deepened from there. Microscopic analysis revealed that the image on the shroud is unbelievably thin, so shallow that it rests only on the outermost fibers of the linen, with a depth of no more than a few hundred nanometers. For context, a single strand of human hair measures about 80,000 nanometers thick. There is no pigment, no paint, no brush strokes. The coloration doesn't seep into the threads. It doesn't even cut them evenly. It's as if the fibers themselves were chemically altered in a way that somehow produced the faint sepia-toned image. Scientists have spent decades trying to reproduce it. They've scorched linen with it, used acid etching, dust transfers, vapor exposure, and even laser radiation. Some of their attempts came close, but none were able to replicate all the properties found in the original shroud. And just when the mystery couldn't get stranger, it did. In the 1970s, researchers at the US Air Force Academy decided to run a new kind of test using a VP8 image analyzer, a device originally designed by NASA to create topographical maps of planetary surfaces. They processed a photo of the shroud through the machine and discovered something shocking. Unlike any normal photograph or painting, the image intensity on the shroud corresponded directly to the distance between the cloth and a three-dimensional object, in this case, a human body. The darker areas, like the tip of the nose, represented regions that were closer to the fabric. The lighter areas, like the cheeks and sides, were farther away. Incredibly, the data produced a perfect three-dimensional relief map of the figure. No work of art in history, no painting, sculpture, or photograph, has ever displayed this kind of built-in spatial information. So what were scientists looking at? A medieval relic? A miracle? Or some form of ancient technology beyond our understanding? That is the question that has haunted researchers for decades. A cloth dated to the Middle Ages that somehow contains the physical behavior of a modern 3D projection. A paradox that refused 2D. And now, with artificial intelligence entering the picture, the paradox is only grown deeper. Because when scientists fed high-resolution digital scans of the shroud into powerful neural networks, they didn't just confirm the mystery. They expanded it. These eyes weren't trained to recognize religious symbols or historical periods. They had no concept of belief, no bias, only algorithms designed to detect patterns hidden within massive datasets. And what they found left even the experts speechless. The machines detected a hidden layer of order, faint geometric symmetries, repeating ratios, and mathematical harmonies embedded across the entire image. They weren't looking at the face of a man anymore. They were looking at a structured, coded pattern woven invisibly into the fabric itself. It's as if beneath the surface of the shroud lies a kind of blueprint, a ghostly network of information that no artist could have drawn, no brush could have painted, and no natural process could have produced by accident. This wasn't merely an image. It was data. And for the first time, scientists began to consider the unthinkable. Could the Shroud of Turin actually be a kind of information technology, a record not just of an event, but of energy itself? What they found was nothing short of astonishing and unsettling. When researchers studied the AS data logs, they realized the neural network had uncovered repeating geometric patterns and mathematical ratios hidden throughout the Shroud's image, not in the visible stains, but deep within the digital data extracted from the linen's microscopic texture. The machine detected harmonic symmetry, a kind of underlying structure woven through the image, something far too complex, too mathematically perfect, for an artist to have fabricated by hand. And these weren't random alignments or coincidental shapes. The ratios obeyed strict geometric laws, proportions found in natural physics and even in biological systems. It was like discovering that the image on the shroud followed a mathematical logic rather than an artistic one. This is what scientists are now calling the code in the cloth. The more they examined it, the more they began to realize this wasn't simply an imprint. It was a recording, a kind of encoded data that preserved physical, geometric, and even spatial information with microscopic precision. For decades, researchers had struggled to explain the contradictions. How could something radiocarbon dated to the Middle Ages contain features that behave like modern technology? It made no sense. But I has changed that conversation entirely, not by solving it, but by making the question itself even bigger. Because if this hidden mathematical order is truly real, then how did it get there? To understand why this discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community, we have to rewind to what was once considered the final answer: the 1988 carbon dating tests. That year, the Vatican allowed scientists to remove a tiny piece of fabric from the shroud for testing. The sample came from a single corner, one of the most accessible and least visually significant parts of the cloth. The sample was cut into pieces and sent to 3 independent laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona. They used a cutting-edge process known as accelerator mass spectrometry, capable of counting individual carbon-14 atoms to determine age with remarkable precision. When all 3 labs produced matching results, the conclusion seemed undeniable. The Shroud's linen was created sometime between 1260 and 1390 AD. For most of the world, that was the end of the mystery. Newspapers declared victory, headlines screamed fake, and scientists moved honorable. But almost immediately, critics began to question the results. The biggest problem wasn't the method, it was the sample itself. That corner of the cloth, the one used for the test, turned out to be one of the most handled and repaired areas in the entire relic history. Think about it. For centuries, the shroud was lifted, displayed, kissed, and even held by its corners during processions. It survived fires, floods, and restoration efforts. After a fire in 1532, nuns from the Purclare Order patched the damaged sections and sewed the entire shroud onto a new backing cloth. The very corner chosen for the carbon dating test was right next to one of those patched areas. So what happens when you test a sample that has a part ancient linen and part medieval repair? You get a modern date, not because the relic is fake, but because you tested the wrong part of it. Years later, a chemist named Raymond Rogers, one of the original scientists from the 1978 Shroud of Turin research project, decided to re-examine leftover fibers from the 1988 sample. Under the microscope, what he discovered shocked everyone. The threads from the tested corner were chemically different from those found on the main body of the cloth. They contained traces of plant gum and dye, and they were interwoven with cotton fibers, whereas the rest of the shroud was made of pure linen. In other words, the tested material was from a medieval reweave, a repair patch expertly done to restore the fabric centuries after its creation. Rogers concluded that the carbon-dated threads weren't part of the original linen at all. It was like trying to determine the age of an ancient temple by analyzing modern cement used in a restoration. His findings reignited the entire debate. Other studies soon followed. Using methods like vibrational spectroscopy and X-ray analysis, independent teams produced data estimates closer to 2,000 years ago, right around the time of Christ. One analysis even suggested the cloth might be as old as 900 BC, while another placed it within the 1st century AD. The problem? None of these newer techniques carry the same global credibility as carbon dating. So while the controversy raged on, the academic world remained split in two, believers on one side, skeptics on the other. That is what makes the AS discovery such a game changer. The artificial intelligence didn't rely on physical samples at all. It didn't need to touch the cloth or analyze its fibers. It simply studied the image itself, the one feature no one disputes. And what it found was completely independent of any dating method. The patterns it detected, the symmetries, ratios, and mathematical harmonies, don't depend on when the fabric was made. They depend on how the image was formed. Which means the entire question of the shroud's age might no longer matter. Because even if the cloth were medieval, how do you explain how a 13th-17th century artisan created a microscopic image that encode perfect three-dimensional data, obeys geometric logic, and hides a network of mathematical relationships invisible to the naked eye, the kind of data that only an eye could recognize 700 years later? You can't. And that's why the discovery has shaken science to its core. The eye didn't settle the debate. It rewrote it. So what exactly did the eye see? What was hidden in the ancient weave that no human eye had ever caught before? It wasn't a message or some secret inscription. It wasn't a name, a symbol, or a code in the traditional sense. It was something far more fundamental, a pattern of pure information, buried deep within the texture of the cloth itself. The neural networks had been programmed to perform a process called principal component analysis, a mathematical method that strips away irrelevant data and isolates only the most significant structures within a dataset. In simple terms, it filters out noise to reveal order. When the eye applied this process to the ultra-high-resolution scans of the shroud, the familiar image of the man began to dissolve into a lattice of light and shadow. But beneath that surface image, something new emerged, an information field. It became clear that the image on the cloth didn't behave like pigment or light. It behaved like data responding to physical laws. The brightness and darkness weren't random variations. They followed a mathematical relationship that matched the distance between the linen and a three-dimensional body, a consistent pattern across the entire cloth. Imagine a sheet gently laid over a human form and then struck by a burst of energy, an invisible pulse that records distance, shape, and intensity in perfect proportion. That's what they found. This wasn't an illusion of depth, it was true depth information encoded into the fibers. The closer parts of the body, like the nose and brow, left stronger marks. The farther parts, like the cheeks and torso, appeared lighter. The transition wasn't artistic shading, it was measurable, consistent, and mathematically precise. That's not how light and shadow behave in a painting. That's not how medieval art works. This was something entirely different, as if the shroud had been formed by a burst of physical energy rather than a human hand. A forger in the 13th-17th century would have needed to understand quantum-level energy distribution, photochemical reactions, and digital mapping centuries before the discovery of electricity. It's simply not possible. But they found something even more baffling. As it continued processing, it detected repeating geometric ratios, invisible alignments connecting key parts of the image. The distance between the eyes, the angles of the nose, the spacing of the hands, the length of the torso, they all conformed to a precise geometric framework. It was like discovering an invisible architectural plan underlying the entire image. And these proportions weren't random either. They corresponded to harmonic ratios, the same mathematical relationships that make certain musical notes sound pleasing together. In other words, the Shroud's image wasn't chaotic. It was harmonized, structured according to a hidden geometry that no medieval craftsman could have known about. The AI confirmed that this geometric harmony extended across the entire cloth, even through the faintest portions of the image. To verify that it wasn't a fluke, or the AI seen patterns where none existed, the researchers ran control tests. They fed the same AI system images of other ancient linens, artworks, and relics from similar time periods. The result? Nothing. No hidden ratios, no geometric grid, no repeating symmetries. The structure was unique to the Shroud of Turin. This finding left scientists facing an almost impossible question. If the image wasn't painted, printed, or burned, and if it wasn't made by contact with a body, then how did it get there? The evidence pointed to a non-contact process, something that projected or radiated the image information onto the cloth from a distance. Several theories have been proposed to explain this. One is the corona discharge hypothesis, the idea that a burst of high-voltage electrical energy around a human body could have lightly scorched the fibers, imprinting an image. Another theory involves a flash of ultraviolet radiation, a microsecond burst of intense light so powerful it could alter the molecular bonds on the linen's surface without burning it. But there is the problem. No modern experiment has ever been able to recreate all the unique features of the shroud. They can reproduce one or two characteristics, maybe the shallow depth or the color tone, but not the full combination. The perfect 3D encoding, the hidden geometry, and the undamaged fibers all at once. It's an enigma wrapped in physics we still don't understand. A physicist studying the phenomenon summarized it perfectly. This doesn't behave like an artifact. It behaves like an event. An artifact is created by human hands. An event is caused by something that happens. So, what kind of event could live behind a nanoscopic, perfectly proportional, three-dimensional image burned into linen that defies every natural explanation? That's the question that no one can answer. The Shroud's image acts like a recording, an impression of an energy release, a trace of something instantaneous, massive, and yet impossibly controlled. It's as if the cloth captured a moment in time, a flash of transformation. And that brings State Uniti to the unsettling part. If the AI is correct, If this hidden mathematical order is real, then we may be looking at the evidence not of a medieval hoax, but of a phenomenon beyond science as we know it. A physical event that left behind not chaos, but code. A message not written in words, but woven into light. If the artificial intelligence is right, then the image on the Shroud of Turin isn't simply a relic, it's a phenomenon frozen in time. Something happened that recorded itself onto linen with microscopic precision, embedding geometric and mathematical order into the very fibers. And that realization opens a door no one knows how to close. Because if it truly behaves more like data than art, then we're not just looking at a picture. We're looking at information transmitted, encoded, and preserved for nearly 2000 years. So, what kind of event could create something like that? That is the mystery that now haunts both scientists and theologians alike. If the AS analysis is correct, the shroud doesn't behave like a painting or even a scorch mark. It behaves like a recording, a data imprint of light, energy, and matter captured in an instant. And that means we're facing only a few possibilities, all of them extraordinary. Could it be the product of a lost ancient technology, something far beyond what we credit early civilizations with? Could it represent a natural law we've never identified, some unknown interaction between energy and organic material that imprints data into matter? Or could it be something else entirely, something supernatural that crosses the line between faith and physics? Each possibility sounds impossible, yet one of them must be true. To grasp just how monumental this is, think about what we've already achieved as a species. We've decoded the human genome. We've photographed black holes. We've sent robots to other planets. But we still don't fully understand how this single image was made. That is why some researchers say they didn't just find a pattern, it found a paradox. Because now, even if the medieval carbon data were correct, scientists must still explain how a 13th-17th century forger could have produced an image that contains microscopic depth information, flawless geometric ratios, and data that obeys mathematical laws that only computers in the 21st century could detect. It's almost laughable, except it isn't. Because no matter which side of the debate you fall on, the question remains the same. How could something so old contain technology so advanced? And maybe that is the point. The AI didn't solve the mystery, it shattered it open. Its analysis bypassed the centuries-old argument about dates and patches and fibers and instead exposed something that transcends them all. A blueprint of impossible precision that no brush or flame could ever leave behind. It's as if the fabric itself remembers something the world has forgotten. The researchers who ran the study are still cautious. They don't claim to have proven anything miraculous, only that the data defies explanation. But behind closed doors, the conversation is changing. If this is truly a structured signal, it may force Stati Uniti to redefine what we mean by artifact. Because artifacts are made by human hands. This seems to have been made by an event, a burst of information. And if that is true, then it's not just history we're studying. It's something that exists at the intersection of matter and meaning, where science, art, and theology collide. So what does it all mean? I found order where there should have been randomness, symmetry where there should have been decay, intelligence where there should have been silence. We are, quite literally, staring at a code woven into cloth, a relic that behaves like a riddle written in light. And maybe that is what it was always meant to be, not proof, but invitation. An invitation to look deeper, not only into the fibers of the shroud, but into the very nature of reality itself. Because if even a piece of linen can hold information beyond our understanding, what else might the universe be trying to tell Stati Uniti? So we're left with the question that has echoed for centuries, and that no microscope or algorithm can answer. What exactly are we looking at? A hoax? A miracle? A forgotten science? Or a message written by something or someone outside of time? Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain. The closer we look, the more the shroud looks back. So what do you think this hidden geometric code truly represents? A lost technology? An undiscovered law of nature? Or the fingerprint of something divine? Let's start unity know your thoughts bill. And if you believe some mysteries are worth exploring, like this one, remember to like this video, share it with someone who loves uncovering the unknown, and subscribe for more stories that test the boundaries between faith, science, and the impossible.